Okay everyone, welcome back as we are prepared to go into Perun's third week of being isolated from his home due to COVID lockdowns and quarantines, and that means yet another nation analysis. But it's not all bad news on my end. Thank you so much for the great response. I didn't expect when I put the Patreon up the other day that so many people would sign up straight away, particularly to the higher tiers. We've already got subscriber requests for videos coming in. So what you're getting tonight is yet another nation analysis, not for the request. The request has been made for MA Urk, but I figured we're going to do EA first so we can preserve our pattern of doing things in order. Just for full disclosure, what I'm hoping to do soon when I get back home and out of lockdown is I'm going to go back to my normal schedule. I'm trying to put out 2, maybe 3 videos a week. Of just free content, but because I've now got 4 people who are sponsoring videos, if they ask for theirs every month, we're probably going to be much closer to definitely getting that 3 per week, and maybe even more. So I'm going to be a busy lad trying to keep up. I'll do the best I can. But yeah, the baseline for me is 2 free, plus a subscriber request for the people from Patreon. There we go. Let's talk about EA today. Usual format, we're going to talk about the lore of the nation, because the adorable Enkidu have a special place in my heart. We're going to talk about the unit and mage lineups. We're going to talk a little bit about strategy after we've gone over detail of the summons. And in that strategy component, we're both going to talk big picture sort of stuff, and also a little more about god design, because some of the particular features of as a nation arguably make god design both more important than normal and open up some options that I wouldn't personally normally value. I wouldn't consider meta. Mainly the potential to take Titan chassis or monster chassis in sort of a dormant position or even an awake position. There's more argument to do it as than there is perhaps as other nations. So first of all, let's talk about the adorable Enkidu. So before you can talk about you have to talk about the species, because is a nation of Enkidu. These half-men creatures you see here, so they're size 3, they have horns on their heads, and they have generally lived a relatively tribal existence. There's actually a couple of different populations of Enkidu spread across the Dominion's universe at the moment, and we are in the sort of Middle Eastern sort of area. There's a very significant just generic tribal population, not controlled by any nation, just small tribes, the equivalent of the Bone tribes, but also just generic tribes of Enkidu about the place. There's a significant enslaved population of Enkidu in the lands of Hinnom. So if you play Hinnom, you can recruit Enkidu slaves. They are at pretty much the bottom of the totem pole in Hinnomite society. Humans haven't really become particularly common over there yet, so it's still Enkidu that fill the role of being at the bottom of the Hinnomite totem pole, laboring and just generally being abused by their Hinnomite Rephaim masters. And then in the center of those sort of tribal areas of the Enkidu, beyond the borders of Hinnom, there is the plains of And here on the plains of we've got, again, 3 sorts of tribal divisions, as I sort of flagged before. You've got sort of the pastoral hunter-gatherer, not hunter-gatherer, pastoral farmer types that are represented in this game as foreign recruit, shaman-led tribal societies. You've got quite aggressive hunter-gatherer, more primitive Enkidu that live in the swamps of the Urish Plains in that area, and they're led by headhunters and bone readers. The third tribe are the ones that is led by. So these are the ones who, having encountered the Avim of Hinnom, have adopted agriculture, metalworking, as I mentioned in the description, but also just the general idea of a settled city-dwelling civilization, and they have now founded a city. As you move into the early age of Eridu, the first city of the Enkidu, has been founded. So there's a gigantic temple at the center, and it's really a young nation. Humanity has been civilized for some time now by the early era. Obviously, the Vanir and whatnot, there are some quite old societies that stretch way back in the early age of dominions. But for the Enkidu, they're only just starting to coalesce. This third group is beginning to coalesce in the idea of a city-led existence. Now, this, I suppose, recent trend towards urbanization is represented in a roster that is really quite diverse between your cities, your swamps, and your non-forted land provinces. There's also an allied species off to the side, the Kululu, who have the upper body of an Enkidu and the lower body of a fish. There you go. There's some interesting history here. The Upper Kalu, who we'll talk about later, are thought to have, I suppose, come out of the water and inspired the Enkidu, based on a civilization that already existed under the water, based on these Kululus. But that civilization was then destroyed and is only now being reconstituted. So the Kululu are not organized in the same way, and perhaps that's why they are secondary to the nation, rather than it being the Kululu who are the nation and the Enkidu of the land who are like the secondary and the foreign recruit component. They are, in essence, just the amphibious wing, distant cousins of this nation. So, the lore presents the Enkidu in quite an optimistic light in a sense. They're coming together, they're forming a nation, there's this great city, there are temple leaders, there's an alliance now because of the awakening god at Senshin War. There's an alliance between the city dwellers, between the pastorals. They've also brought in the bone tribe sort of equivalent, the ones who dwell in the swamps, the headhunters essentially, and the Kululu are all coming together in order to make a stand. There's also, I suppose, still a sense of mourning and difficulty because a significant portion of the Enkidu population is enslaved in the lands of Hinnom and aren't going to do particularly well going forward. So, that's your lore setting. You have a great city, you've got city dwellers, you've got swamp dwellers, plains dwellers, water dwellers, and all of them are coming together to form, I suppose, a grand army, a combined front of the Enkidu in order to wage an ascension war if you're intervening, and if not, they'll coalesce naturally into the city-states that we know of the nation of Uruk by the time you get to the Middle Age. Eridu will eventually lose its dominance, and the Enkidu will move into a city-state sort of format. Let's also talk about the Enkidu themselves in terms of biology, because this platform is going to inform all the troops that we're talking about. The Enkidu is, at its base, a relatively high HP, size 3 individual with a pathological hatred of headgear and reasonably good gold cost to HP ratio. So they're pretty strong. They have more hit points than humans, and they're in the size 3 bracket. In general, size 3 is a decent bracket to be in. It's occupied by cavalry, some of the most dominant units in Dominions. The Enkidu, they're in the size 3 bracket, but instead of having cavalry statistics where they preference defense skill and sometimes multiple attacks, Enkidu preference human level statistics compensated for by enhanced strength and hit points. Ultimately, it is not a trade-off that makes them worthwhile compared to most cavalry units, but it's something to keep in mind. It has its own advantages that mostly come into play when you talk about Middle Age Uruk, but even in the Age of they're worth talking about. That's the basic platform that you're talking about when you deal with the Enkidu. So, a lot of units to get through, so I'm going to talk about them in turn. But the general analysis for a lot of these, I'm going to go with the initial units. So let's talk about these guys here, who are your fort recruits. Then we're going to talk about your foreign recruits, and finally your underwater. And here is the Enkidu soldier, the first of your fort recruits. He is your low resource, low rec point option. So, what's good, what's bad here? Well, 16 gold is buying you 24 hit points, which is a better ratio than an ordinary human soldier. And you're also not paying many resources or rec points per HP, and they hit really, really hard. 20 damage is great. The problem with the Enkidu soldier, and also the problem with the Enkidu platform in general, but it's more apparent with the later ones where they actually gain armor. The Enkidu soldier doesn't have enough armor in general. But later on, the problem that you encounter is the combination of 24 hit points and the lack of head protection. So, let's go back to Dominion's combat mechanics for a moment and explain why this is a serious problem. If someone can reach your head, that means all missile weapons, it means projectile magic, and it means any person with a weapon who the size of the unit plus the length of the weapon combined equals at least the size of the target, they can reach the head. If you can reach the head, there's generally a 10% chance of hitting it. Okay? So 10% of the time, Enkidu, no matter how much their armor, they're going to take it straight in their unarmored noggin. The problem with having 24 hit points is very precise, and this amount of hit points is pretty consistent. We got up to 27 at the elite sort of chosen level, or 26 at Urgard, but we're sort of in this territory. Here is a problem straight off the bat. The Slingstone, the basic human Slingstone, just as an example, does 8 blunt damage. Blunt damage does 50% more damage if it hits you in the head. So that 8 damage becomes 12. If you take at least half your hit points in head damage, so if something hits your head and you take at least half your health, so remember that Slingstone's doing 12 on average, and we got 24 to 26 hit points, about half the time you're going to lose half your hit points to a single Slingstone, and that's an instant KO. Slingstones that struggle to consistently kill or even significantly injure humans who wear helmets will kill Enkidu pretty well, just through the attrition of those head hits seriously debilitating or killing them. And later on, projectile magic that can hit the head. This is a problem, and it's a problem that holds down the chassis as a whole. The other issue is that attack density is lower, but also the number of attacks coming in is spread between fewer targets. Enkidu generally do not have spectacular defense stats, nor do they have spectacular armor, particularly on the Enkidu soldier, which means these hit points don't last as long as you'd think. Being non-cavalry units, they get the full harassment penalty, so if you're facing a square of, say, Olmish Axe Warriors, 30 gold worth of Axe Warriors versus 32 gold worth of Enkidu soldiers, the Enkidu soldiers are going to get unceremoniously murdered. They might hit one of the Axe Warriors and probably kill him, but the remaining Axe Warriors are going to slaughter the Enkidu. And that's just an unfortunate problem that this unit, the Enkidu soldier, and to an extent the rest of these guys, are always going to be relatively high attrition units. Significant utility because 20 damage means there's a lot of things that you can cut through, particularly in the early age. But the weakness here of the Enkidu soldier is protection, low defense, and of course the unarmored head. And the unarmored head becomes more of a problem as you go left to right. Enkidu Spear Guard gains the ability to have a spear, so now we're now at 18 piercing damage instead of 20 slashing. So we're taking away some damage. So we're taking away some protection, but we're losing some damage if we do get through the protection. We're only up to Protection 9. Swapping up to the Bronze Cuirass only gets us up to Prot 9, and again, still Unarmored Head. And of this defense skill of 11, 4 of that is actually Shield Parry. There are things that might get through 25, which is your shield plus your Bronze Cuirass. Just keep that in mind. There are some giants and things that can punch straight through an Enkidu shield, although you've got enough hit points, you can probably survive it. Spear Guard are okay. The Urgard, instead, I think are a little bit better. You pay a little more gold, but this is what I would consider your basic sort of troop. You're still only at Protection 9, which is pretty freaking pathetic. Your skills have gone up a bit. You're now spending the same as 2 human infantrymen, roughly. You're spending 19 gold, but still only 13 resources and 13 rec points, which means this is a relatively gold-intense unit. The encumbrance is not horrific. What you're getting here in terms of advantages is we're now at 21 slashing at attack skill 12. This hurts, so when this hits, and it'll hit reasonably often, it hurts. Morale is good, MR is good, and we've got a castle defense bonus. So I'm okay with the Urgard, but it's still pretty... All of these troops are mediocre. All of these troops are mediocre to poor. Enki's Chosen make you feel even worse about this, because now you're spending 30 gold per. You're spending 17 resources, 18 recruitment points. You're still doing that 21 damage bronze hatchet, and you have Sacred now. So this is a Sacred capital-only unit, and you're feeling good about yourself and good about your life. You still got an unarmored noggin, and that's a problem. Anyway, Enki's Chosen with a moderate bless, they're good, but, you know, human groups and cavalry groups will all expand more efficiently than Enkidu units. You do have the Enkidu Hornblower. This is a recruitable standard. I like recruitable standards. It's just +1 morale for every squad they're in for 35 gold. Negligible resources. Recruitment points usually not your problem, so there it is. And there's an interesting Sacred. So this is the Mushushu. So this is a wingless relative of the dragon. that lives in the swamps of Ur. Now, this is limited recruitment, 1 per turn capital only, so you can only ever get 1 per turn. 150 gold. Attack 14, defense 9, prot 15, so they're a little bit tough, size 5. Unsurroundable, so they don't get completely murdered, but even though it's unsurroundable 1, it's just 1. And with defense skill 9, they're going to get hit a lot. So you're mostly relying on it not getting crit, fighting against enemies that don't do much damage. The main advantage, I would say, with the Mashushu, because you're never going to have many of them, right, is this Fear Aura. The way I would use the Mashushu, if you choose to use them, because they're a little risky to use, but you might find you have a lot of gold and you're looking to get as much power out of your gold in the early game as you can, is use this Fear Aura. If you mix one in so it's in a group of Enkidu and you time it so that it's arriving at your opponent at the same time, otherwise it's going to advance quicker because it's got combat speed 18. If you time it so it arrives as the other troops are, so it doesn't get surrounded, it'll add some decent damage, but mostly it's adding a Fear 5 aura which should rout your opponent quicker, and that may help and save you some battles. I wouldn't bless for Mashushu because you'll never have enough. So something like this, you look at this chassis and you're like, ooh, if I can get some more prot on this and regen, this could actually be reasonably tanky, for example. And I could tank Fear Expand. Well, you're not going to have enough of them, right? Because you're going to need other units in the squad in order to stop it from getting a small squad routing penalty, but those units will just get killed. And you're not going to have 5 of them in a squad, and if you do, you'll have one of those parties at turn 6 and another one at the end of expansion. It's not going to get you anywhere as a strategy in and of itself. So I would restrict the Mashushu to being a blessable Fear Aura that you don't forget about, but it's certainly not the basis of a strategy. Let's now talk foreign recruitment. And the theme with foreign recruitment is we don't really have technology. These are Enkidu that say, well, sure, we still don't wear hats, but we also don't wear much chest armor either. So you've got the agrarian sort of chill Enkidu in non-fort provinces. And when I say foreign rec, I mean all non-fort provinces that aren't swamps or oceans. You get these troops available to you. 3 of them suck and 1 of them is good. The first is this guy, Club Enkidu. Club Enkidu is 16 gold, 2 resources and 9 rec points, which means if you have gold, you can pump out a lot of these guys. 18 blunt, 10 attack, 8 defense is horrible. He's a sack of HP with 18 damage on attack skill 10. Pass. Spear Enkidu, 17 piercing at 10 attack. He's got a little more defense now. This is a little bit better. I'm still probably going to pass. This is a lot of gold to spend on a pretty ordinary troop. Enkidu Warrior is Club Enkidu, but he has a shield. So he's demonstrably better than Club Enkidu. Club Enkidu's only advantage is this 2 resources. So you can get lots of him if you want, but I'd rather get them a shield because I don't like my gold being unceremoniously massacred. The real unit to recruit here is the Enkidu Archer. Now, you're still spending a lot of gold for what you're getting. You're spending 16 gold to get a longbow with decent strength. Now, in the later ages, human nations will recruit 10 gold longbows or 11 gold longbows. That's obviously a better proposition. But in the early era, a longbow that hits for 14 damage, piercing, is good enough to do a lot of work against a lot of things. And because it's foreign recruitment, you will be able to mass up a squad of 10, 20 of these for one of your expansion parties using your foreign provinces, using your spare gold. At least I found you're able to. If you have to recruit your outside fort recruits that aren't in swamps, you want to bulk out your expansion parties, you want a little bit of firepower, the Enkidu Archer's complete lack of protection isn't as important. They're less likely to be taking a lot of hits in the head from melee weapons, and unless you're fighting a human opponent who is smart enough to set his archers to hit the head, you're less likely to be getting them all KO'd with head hits, and even then, they're not wearing that much protection on their body anyway, so it's not a huge problem. I'd still rather wear a helmet. Meanwhile, 14 pierce on those longbows means they're actually going to kill things, especially as those things then close in. If the enemy does get close, it's got a attack skill 10 on its 17 pierce damage dagger, so it can hurt things just at defense skill 7, probably going to get murdered itself, but don't forget Enkidu archers exist from a foreign rec point of view. The swamp guys are kind of cool in a sense. So the Enkidu Reaver and the Enkidu Hunter are your swamp recruits, and the key here is stealthy. These are stealth raiding troops, hypothetically. The problem is getting enough of them is difficult because swamps are not common, and when they do exist, they don't have many resources in them. But hypothetically, hunters and their more elite compatriots do give you stealthy troop options, and berserking stealthy troop options. So the Enkidu Hunter is a Berserker 1, so he'll go to 8 prot once he's taken some damage, and he'll survive his first hit probably because of those 24 hit points. Still cheap on resources and rec points. Stone Spear and Furs, so 17 damage, but also this thing, a 17 damage 2 ammunition javelin. So a decent group of Enkidu Hunters throwing these things, and they'll throw them at close range because javelins are close range weapons, are going to kill some people. Because 17 pierce is enough to do serious harm to a lot of things out there, and to kill some humans through light protection. They'll cut 20% off the armor, and they'll be rolling 17 against 80% of prot. Combine that with a human hit point average of around 10, you may get a kill. In fact, you're quite likely to get serious damage, afflictions, or kills off javelins. So I quite like the Enkidu Hunter. When I say I like Enkidu troops, or any given Enkidu troop, remember, I would rather human troops, or lizard troops, or giant troops, but of the Enkidu lineup, which is not particularly good or inspired, I like the Hunter. The Reaver's problem is that we're up to now 26 gold, so we're paying a lot. We may have 27 hit points, but we're paying a lot for something that still has prot 7. He's up to Berserker 3, but that only means prot 10. The advantage here is that when he berserks, he's going to have attack skill 15 on his bronze hatchet. He's going to have useless defense skill. He'll take so many hits, but with the extra attack skill, he'll reliably hit with the bronze hatchet. I think I probably prefer the javelins most of the time against most opponents. And then underwater, you have 2 brands of Kolulu. Kolulu are, compared to the other things that you will encounter in the water, pretty freaking crap. They will get eaten alive by Tritons, they will get eaten alive by Atlanteans, they will get eaten alive by Relayans, Oceanians. There's basically nothing in the water that Kolulu will reliably beat. They exist. They're aquatic. So you have bare chest, pecs out for the boys Kolulu, 18 gold for 28 hit points. Sure, no resources or rec points. You do 18 pierce, but you're a big stack of HP with 9 defense and 4 prot, you're going to die. This guy wears bronze scales and so has prot 10, but doesn't have a helmet, so can still get KO'd like other guys. You're still only spending 18 gold. If you've got to fight underwater and you need Kolulu troops for whatever reason, they're available. Just always compare your Kolulu troops if you get underwater to what you can get in terms of indie troops in the same provinces, because the indie troops are probably going to be better in a lot of cases, especially the aquatic options. You might find Amber Clan Tritons, for example, which shit all over Kolulu for the same price. Shark Tribe, great. Like, there's a lot of independent options that you would rather recruit compared to your nationals, which is kind of sad. Anyway, that's your troop lineup. Pretty mediocre city set with a few standouts. You've got 2 sacreds, one is a half dragon thing, and then you've got basically choose your own weapon on medium armor. You've got heavy armor sacred, or you've got discount option, hits really hard but is probably going to get murdered. You have 3 troops that exist to get murdered, that it costs lots of gold but just die outside of your forts. Also a longbow outside of your forts. Recruit this guy. And then you've got hunters and reavers in swamps, of which you probably want the 17 damage javelin. You can do some stealthy raiding with 17 damage javelins. Let's talk about the not insubstantial mage lineup. So, Enkidu Scout, recruitable everywhere, including outside forts. That line is important. The fact that you can recruit Enkidu Scouts outside your forts means you don't need to find indie human scouts to have scouts, so you should always have scouts. A player who plays who does not have good intelligence and does not have scouts is doing it wrong. You have scout access everywhere, so you should have scouts everywhere. That's his main advantage. He's very unremarkable other than that. The Enkidu Elder is an interesting unit, and I swear when I played Dom 4, I'm not sure this guy existed. But here he is. The Enkidu Elder is remarkable, in a sense, because he's a commander who costs, get this, 15 gold and 1 rec point. So for 2 resources and 1 rec point and 15 gold, you get a leader. A leader who is capable, I stress, of has a leadership value of 80. Now, he's got inspirational -1, but all inspirational -1 does is take off the usual bonus that 80 leadership would give him. So this is one of the cheapest recruitable commanders in the game. Yes, he's old, but he's one of the cheapest recruitable commanders in the game. So incredibly cheap. Cheaper, in fact, than your soldiers. And I take this to mean that there are so many elders in Eridu, and they are so desperate to be important that they're willing to work, them and their staff are willing to work for less than actual, like, baseline soldiers who demand 16 gold in order to serve as a unit. What does the Enkidu Elder give you? Well, he's a cheap-ass leader, he's a tax collector. I usually don't care about this. Just as a reminder, this means that even if you're cut off from a fort, the province a tax collector is in still raises taxes. So you can have provinces that are cut off from any fort still raise taxes. The interesting thing here is this thing, Defense Organizer. This unit will increase the PD of the province he is in. The defense cannot increase higher than 19. Multiple units with this ability will not speed the defense organizing in a single province. So, if you look at this guy, he costs 12 gold a year, so it costs exactly 1 gold per turn. But he creates between 1 gold and 19 gold worth of PD per turn for free. And he does that while leading troops around and generally being useful. Because the Enkidu Elder exists, you can shave a little bit of efficiency off your PD builds. And you're also likely to have more PD. The compensation for that is your PD sucks, because it's Enkidu. Enkidu plus whatever units are in the province. But if it's like a heavy cavalry province, for example, 19 PD might be useful. And you'll eventually get there if you have some Enkidu Elders running around, sitting in provinces. 1 per province, all leading troops or just shuttling around. You're going to be making a little bit of profit off that extra PD. You'll also get to that 15 level where you start to get, it's possible to roll patrol dice, which is handy. Yeah, I think it's nifty. The Enkidu Elder is not like enough to make this a super good nation, but it's handy having a super cheap leader who's also defense organizer. I think that's cool. I'm happy with that. The Enkidu Commander, meanwhile, costs 45 gold, has 60 leadership, and isn't inspirational -1, so make elders instead most of the time, basically. I'm happy with that. While, where can I find it? Can I find a case where I've got an Enkidu Elder out leading troops? Like, there you are. See, their squad morale -1. They're not going to have -1 if they're on a commander. Because 80, correction, 80 is not enough to give a morale bonus. I'm pretty sure. I think 80 is just enough to give formations. So you do lose 1 morale, compensate by building a standard, and carry around a guy who's going to make PD. Great. They will eventually, however, get old, and because they're going to get old, eventually they'll slow down. But I still think, at least in the initial phase of the game, I'm going to create elders, and they're going to help me set up my PD, and later on, I'm going to retire them. They're just going to make PD, or shuttle troops around, and other commanders can lead them. You have the Enkidu, he does that job, but you'll see your mages are available as well. Gala are interesting. Gala are very interesting. Gala are sacred, Nature 1 Priest ones that cost 1 resource and 75 gold, which means with Magic 3, this is a 10 research for 75 gold half upkeep, which makes it one of the more efficient researches in the game. So you want to have them. Nature 1 is sort of useful in an emergency, because Nature 1 means swarm in case of emergency. And the real special thing about Galas is this thing, Elegist, and it leads to Ur's special ability, which I was waiting until I hit the Gala to talk about. Ur is really good at bringing their god back from the dead. There's two sides to this. The first is they have a 75 gold sacred mage who counts as holy 3 when doing Call God. So if you need 50 points of recall, I believe, in order to recall a dead god, can do it in 2 turns using 10 Gala. They can reliably do it, they can do it in 1 turn reliably if you allocate even more Gala later in the game. 1 turn revive using mages that aren't going to be giving you too much opportunity cost in terms of gold and lost research. The other thing is when they recall their god, the recalled god doesn't lose magical paths. So as long as you've got a way to control for afflictions, you're not going to suffer the biggest defect of normally losing your god, which is losing those precious magical paths. Can send their god into danger, send them at the front of the pack, and know that they can bring that god back with the same paths as when it left. It is a great advantage that shapes the way I think you can play if you want to lift this from being a pretty below average nation to workable and having some plays. Anyway, Salme. Salme is still sacred. We're now spending 25 gold more, up to 9 research, and we're at Water 1, Nature 1. Cool. Hope you enjoy your Water 1. It's where you get your Water 1. It's where you get your reliable Water 1 when you need it, but you don't need a huge amount of reliable Water 1. Other than that, it is what it is. The Guru, now we're getting up in terms of price. We're still in the cities though, so we're still at 2 resources and rec points. We now have a choice. Either we are going to be an Heir 2 or we are going to be an E2. E2 is a nifty path to have guaranteed access to anywhere in your roster, because that's where you start getting. E2 is the start of the boost chain for Earth. So you're going to get things like hammers and Earth boots and all that. You're going to have the general Earth access starts at E2, strictly speaking, and the Guru will have it. They'll also have some A2s, but notably they will not have A3, and A3 is a magic number for EA. Unfortunate. That said, I like the Earth ones, and the Air ones can be decent combat mages. A2 means with 2 gems you can do a full-sized air elemental. A2 means that if you have something that can put up storm, you can storm power, you can be A3, and you can play with the big boys. So Guru have a place in the roster. The Gala is your efficient researcher plus your elogist. Your Guru has a place in the roster. The Salme, The Ishib is the Water 2 Priest 2. And this is a little awkward. Water 2 is not a particularly important place to be. So I don't really have the Ishib highlighted most of the time. Priest 2 is also an awkward place when you have Holy 3s in your roster, because most people don't recruit Holy 2s when Holy 3s are available. Now, it's not cap only, but a capital only supply of Holy 3s is usually sufficient, I think, for most nations. And you've got 2. The first is the N2, the female option. So this is E2, again, that guaranteed E2 access, just on a more expensive mage. E2 N1, priest level 3, and then either 1 air, 1 water, a 3rd level of earth, E3, or an extra level of nature to get you to N2. So, see what I did there? N2. Inspirational plus 2 is okay, but you only have 10 leadership, so you're particularly inspiring to the small group of bodyguards you drag around. The NC is here with Water 2, Nature 1, and again the same sort of set of randoms. These are mostly here, no getting around it, these are mostly here for the Holy 3. I consider them mostly to be here for the Holy 3. They're quite cheap for Holy 3s in it, when you consider that they're not human-sized, but there are definitely cheaper Holy 3s out there in the game too. So I just take it as a recruitable Holy 3 and I'm happy for it. The NC can lead troops. He's in fact your best leader at Inspirational 1 Leadership 80. The Enkidu are not particularly known for their fine generals, but he is what he is. Anyway, recruitable Holy 3 options. And then let's talk about outside your capital. Outside your capital you get some guys, and then you get some quite important units. Enkidu Chief is a 45 gold, 40 leadership Beastmaster 1. Fine, not particularly important. Enkidu Hunter Chief exists because you need stealthy leaders to lead your stealthy troops. He'll lead 40 dudes stealthily. Cool. That's why he exists. The Enkidu Headhunter is another option. He has the same sort of deal in that he's got stealthy. His thing is that he's got this big magic damage punchy weapon, and also I think he's pillager, whereas the other one is not a pillager. So if you're purposefully going to use these guys to pillage, then cool, the Headhunter exists. Otherwise, the Hunter Chief exists. Then you've got the Bone Reader, and the Bone Reader is interesting. You've got, for 120 gold, non-sacred, and he's 2 rec points, so you put a lab in a swamp and you recruit him in 2 turns. Earth 1, Death 1, with a random of Water, Earth, Death. And what you really want here is the D2. Because when you've got a stealthy D2, you've actually got a stealthy D3 because you can make a death stick. And the Bone Reader means that you are going to be able to build up a death income. You have enough death income to run around your territory, search for death gems, and you can get there. You can get to D3. You need a way to break into the higher levels of death, but you have a way to get a death income, you have a way to do basic skelly spam in small numbers, you can bring a little bit of death into your armies, and I think it's really handy. It's a great addition to the Enkidu roster. They're also fortune tellers, sure. One thing to keep in mind is this inept research of 4 plus non-sacred plus a base research of 7 when you account for inept researcher means that any turn a Bone Reader is sitting around doing nothing but researching, you're doing it wrong, you're missing out. Bone Readers and Shamans, who I'll show in a second, should not be static. They must be fighting or they must be sight searching. They are not sitting in your forts. They are not sitting in your provinces doing nothing. So, Bone Reader is your death access. The Shaman is a badass. The Enkidu Shaman is a badass. So he cannot be recruited in your forts. And these guys are interesting because they're the parallel power structure. They're the old power structure of the Enkidu before the city of Eridu was created. They were the spiritual and they used to be temporal leaders as well. With the founding of the first city, it says they've lost much of their influence, except for over the ones that live in the plains, obviously, but their magical powers are undiminished. Enkidu Shamans are powerful mages of the wild earth, rivaled only by the Panai of Pangaea, and you can see that straight off the bat right here with Nature 3. This is big nature. And more than that, you've got a chance to roll another nature path, so you can be N4. N4 means you create a stick, you're N5. If you recruit a statistical average of 3 shamans, you will have an out-of-the-box mage that is capable of making a booster and then casting Mother Oak. You are one of those nations that is in the group that can cast Mother Oak and Nature Globals and big nature spells really easily. The fact that you have a water random means that you have available to you Foul Vapors at Ench 5. So you are a nation that can cast Foul Vapors. You have Sacreds that could be poison resistant, you have mages that are sacred that can be poison resistant, and you have nature mages that can protect themselves from poison and personal regenerate. So the Shaman on its own makes you a big nature nation. You've got some N2 elsewhere in the roster, like you can get N2 from your capital only mages. You've got lots of N1 and N1 sacreds to boot. But if you want to talk about your big nature access, it's right here with the Enkidu Shaman. And this means Howl, Relief, Mass Regen, Mass Protection. Mass Protection is good because it means your head gets armor. All the big nature battlefields, nature is a good mid-game to early late-game battlefield-wide buff path. Enkidu Shamans are there for it. They're also going to find you lots of nature gems. Just make sure they're not out there, they're not sitting still. Make sure they're always sight searching or helping out your armies, because you're paying 220 gold per year to upkeep these guys. They're even a potential candidate for transformation. They're that expensive. They're not quite as expensive as Pans and Capricorns, because they make up for the slightly worse chassis, but still a potential candidate for transformation. And foreign rec. These are a reason to build some labs outside and then carefully protect them. Underwater, you get a 40 leadership commander, an 80 leadership Holy 2 commander, the Kululu King. You get the Kululu Sage, who interestingly is your only astral access. He's also a pretty good researcher. If you want to brute force your research, you're spending 190 gold, sure, but he's only 2 rec points, he gives you 15 base. So if you want to brute force research, the Kululu Sage underwater is there. Plus, as I said, your only way to get astral organically. And then you've got, and the Kululu Queen can also do astral organically through a random as well. So you've got a little bit of astral underwater. It's only S1. S1's not enough to do a lot, but it's there. They can wear hats though, so if you can get you might get to S2. With some trading, you might have S3, and S3 is enough to make your own boosters. And maybe you can go somewhere with this, but I think you're generally going to struggle to get anywhere with it. It's not an impressive underwater thing. Hey, you can technically do really, really expensive underwater communions. Like, congratulations. You're going to get eaten by relay. I don't think the underwater component is particularly important, but it exists. The most important thing about this underwater side of the roster, before I finish off discussing the roster in general, is that because it exists, you can build underwater forts. That's the most important part of the underwater roster. Not that you have national underwater recruits, although that's handy. The most important thing is that you can make use of underwater provinces. If there are particularly interesting indies, you can build labs and forts under there, but it relies on you not having anyone who's better underwater in order to kick you out. Anyway, so what do you see when you look at this roster overall? I look at a nation that has a thoroughly mediocre troop lineup, in that the troop lineup is vulnerable to a lot of things. It's vulnerable to slingstones, missile weapons, mass attacks, weapons that hit hard, high skill enemies because their skills aren't particularly high, and even the most elite troops don't have particularly high attack values, although you can bless for that. You have a capital-only sacred that's impossible to mass in particularly large numbers. In terms of mages, the situation's a little bit better. You have a Holy One Elogist Researcher, who's also an N1, which means can fight an emergency. You've got A2s and E2s, which, aren't horrible. And then you've got a supply of both Death to contribute to the mix, and Big Nature. So instantly you're thinking, mass protection, Foul Vapors, Regen, Serpent's Blessing, Relief Howl, all that good stuff is available to you as That's one component. The other component is the easily recallable God. So let's think about what this all comes together at in terms of strategy. Well, firstly, the mediocre troop lineup means that expansion isn't great. You can do it, and in particular, you can brute force it a little bit because you can recruit troops outside your fort. So once I've taken this province over here, I can squeeze out an extra Enkidu here. I can squeeze out 3 archers. I could squeeze out 3 archers and 1 foot soldier here if I'm willing to spend the gold. So you can kind of keep your expansion parties going, and with lots and lots of cheap elders, you can pick up those and you can sort of keep your parties going. For the most part though, my early game recruitment parties were consisting of either, if I was using blessed tests, it would be Enki's Chosen groups. Usually about 10 to 15 did the job, or like 15-ish Urguard would do the job, particularly if you mixed in 1 Mashushu as a fear source, maybe with a couple of crap indies to stop it running away and time its run into your opponents. The other thing I could do is, one setup you can do is if the Mashushu is on guard commander and the commander gets close, but that's risking your commander, but you can use hold orders on the commander to get this guy close enough to use his fear aura without him routing. It's just you put the commander in some danger. So you've got problems with initial expansion. Your initial expansion economy is hampered further by the fact that your first level of fort costs 750 gold and takes 5 months, instead of costing 600 and taking 4 for an ordinary palisade. The difference is, while the city palisade only has the same 100 wall integrity, so you're spending more gold and another turn, and you're still getting only the same wall integrity, you're also only getting 6 archers, 6 longbows, not great. You get your CP bonus straight away. So you don't have to rush to pay the exorbitant 450 gold to update to this thing, a walled city. All the walled city gives you is an extra 100 wall integrity, 10 admin, I think. Yeah, 10 admin and no CP bonus, and you double the number of archers to 12. Don't upgrade your forts if you're playing. I think the rule is don't upgrade your forts. I don't think 450 gold for an extra 100 wall integrity and some extra defenders and 10 admin is worth it. I think I'd rather have an extra lab almost. It could be indeed a foreign recruitment lab, so I can make myself some shamans. So over in a province like this, I'm capable of making Enkidu Shamans or Enkidu Bone Readers, as long as I don't ruin it by building a fort, which I was about to do. So that's the first side of the equation. Expansion is initially a little bit difficult, but you can do it using your troops. My expansion here is, I think, only 21? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21 provinces. And I think I've gone one turn longer than I normally would during these tests. I think we're in turn 14. So you're going to struggle a little bit more out of the gate compared to... This is an era where you're sharing the game with things like Einhirs, right? Like Vanhirs. So you're a little slower out of the gate. You need a plan. You can scrape your way through expansion, so you don't desperately need an awake expander, although an awake expander would help you. The question I have is, how do you then stop yourself getting rushed after year 0? Most rushes don't happen in year 0. Most rushes happen in year 1. They happen in that turn 12 plus bracket. So how do I make the most of and to me, this suggests there's a real advantage for in a dormant titan or a dormant monster play. The reason I say this is because not losing magic... Bringing out an awake titan is not great because most titans, can't expand. Can't expand out of the box. Some can, but most can't expand out of the box. They need a little bit of research so they can regen or self-buff, or they need to use the Titan's real advantage, which is that they have full equipment slots in order to get out there. They might need some armor, they might need a better weapon, they might need something going for them to make them available. And you don't have that at the start of the game. So Construction 2, for example, Construction 2, Alt 2 or Alt 3, Ench 2, suddenly transforms what a Titan is capable of doing, because suddenly you've got Iron Skin, Mist Form, Personal Regen, and it's got a bunch of equipment. Completely different game. So why spend 150 design points having it uselessly stand around? Have it come at turn 12, have the equipment ready to go for it, it goes out and it's handy. Awake Monster, similarly, Ur's big advantage is that you can revive your god more quickly, but you can't revive your god super quickly in the first 12 turns anyway, because you won't have many galas ready. So losing your monster in the initial turns would still be a complete disaster. I would rather keep the 150 design points, have a Titan or something scary pop out in turn 12, ready to go, and it can either complete my expansion or it can be a centerpiece of my war. A really greedy Uruk will take an imprisoned Titan and use it really aggressively from turn 36 onwards, but I think as Uruk, I'm conservative. I want to be able to push people back from turn 12. The other thing is, if there are no water nations in the game, having a dormant monster or a dormant titan, in this case, this is not particularly amazing, but I went, it's an Air 4, E5, Nature 4, Fire Shock Res. This is a super resistance, bless, poison resistance, Anunnaki of Love and War. So it's got ore, it's resistant to basically most things you can throw at it in elemental terms. I think it's missing cold res, but cold res would be easy to add to it. I've given it armor so it can go underwater. I've given it a spear so it can repel, the Ice Lance. It has Iron Skin, Mist Form, Mirror Image, Earth Power, and Personal Regen, and it'll cut through an awful lot of things. Even at Construction 2, and later on it would be even more scary. These paths also give us access to the summons, and I'm leaving the summons for afterwards because there's synergy between what you pick for your god and whether you then want to have the summons, because really there's some of them where the only way you can get access to them is through the god. So I wanted to talk about that general concept first. But here you can see I'm underwater on turn like 13 or 14 because my Titan's come out, I've given it its gear, and there's now all this little pond here, 3 extra provinces I can expand into, or if there's an earlier a war, I can catch someone off guard with like an early cloud trap. An early cloud trap like pocket SC against a guy who's not ready for it. My troops aren't great, but bang, here we go. Or I've got paths that they weren't expecting. That's why I'm in for the dormant play. And I wouldn't normally advocate the dormant play. I'm a big scales guy. I love a good imprisoned rainbow. I think imprisoned rainbows are the most common choice, I think, in the meta for a reason. Them and awake monsters are both pretty popular. I think that the dormant titan or even the imprisoned titan for is handy, because I think titans go hand in hand with because they can be used very aggressively. Otherwise, yeah, sure, a monster that you can call back really quickly, handy, and will help you more before you have research and items than something like a titan will relative to the cost. I'm going to pivot now. I'm going to show you those summons, because now that we've talked a little bit about the god, the summons sort of element will make a little bit more sense in terms of what it takes to get access to them. So off to the mod inspector with us. Okay, so here we are for the summons, and really, I'm only really here for one, maybe two of them. Buffalo are berserking, a berserking size 4 tramplers. You can get them at Conjuration 3. 10 gets you 5 buffalo plus 1/2 for every level scaling. So if you had a really high nature guy, you get lots of size 4 buffalo, but they've got defense skill 7, prot 5. They do have 43 hit points though. Niche, the place where I'd roll these out is if your castle is under attack, you summon like a set of these while you're under siege. If you get these guys into the gate at exactly the right time, you might get some carnage, because they do all need to be killed before they'll stop, because they're berserkers. Handy, not amazing. The Anzu, I profess not to have used much or have even tested much. It's at Con 7. It's really cheap at Con 7. So what this thing is basically a flying breath weapon with 72 damage. What you're really here for is this thing, the flaming breath. So it's beam weapon, range 6, so it gives you that spurting flame. So like drakes, like flame drakes, except it's flying and it's recruitable with air gems. It's also got water breath, which is also a beam weapon, kind of cool. They both have multiple shots of ammunition. This thing I'm not so sure about. I think you need to experiment with using it, and it's going to come a little bit late in order to figure out exactly how you're going to bring it into your roster. I'll test them more before I do Uruk. It's interesting, but purchasable beam weapons, I'm not sure, but it is very cheap. The Kusariku is more interesting for niche applications in that this is a summonable sacred, and you get them at Conjuration 4. Now, if you've got lots of earth gems, this is technically a summonable sacred that you can summon with all of your earth mages. And that might be an idea behind more of a Blessy build for Uruk, for and also for Uruk. What do you get? You get 15 magic resistance, 16 morale, all of which are great. The stats are a little bit better than normal in that the attack's higher, the defense is still pretty shit. But you get 2 attacks. For the first time, thank Christ, you get 2 attacks. And the attacks are not bad. The gore is just a standard, like, intrinsic weapon. But the Aptropaic Spear, 1 has lots of damage on it, but 2 is magic intrinsically and has an extra paralysis damage on demons. Not bad. Against demons, this is a really cool weapon. Against enemies who are ethereal or mist-forming, this is a way to get some magic weapons into your lines relatively cheaply. They're 3 earth gems each. So they're a little bit pricey, but they're not super pricey, and they are sacred. So depending on your bless, you may be able to do something with these. I would put some buffs on them and deploy them in niche circumstances. The one I'm not sure I'm excited about, but normally would be, is this thing, the Umu Apkalu. The Umu Apkalu is one of the most multipath mages in the game. It's great. It's A3, Water 3, Earth 2, Astral 4. So big astral access, N2, Holy 2. It's everything. It's resistant to cold, shock. It heals diseases. It's an inspired researcher. And it is sacred, so it takes your bless. It's got some decent hit points, so it's not going to get remoted, and it can cast all sorts of spells and be at the head of communions. 3 problems. 1, Conjuration 8. 2, Astral Pearl summoning cost. So not only does it come late, it uses a gem that you're probably going to have to alchemize because you have very few ways to search for Astral Pearls. You need to take your aquatic units with Astral on land and search. The third problem is you need Astral 5 to summon. So unless you have Astral on your god, you're not getting Umu Apkalu. Not Astral 5. Astral 3 would do it if you can make boosters. You need Astral on your god in order to use the Umu Apkalu, and the problem is having low Astral on your god makes them vulnerable to magic duels, so you want to buy up significant amounts of Astral. We're talking about a big investment at this point to just get a Conjuration 8 summon. I don't think so. But it's cool. The one I really care about is this thing, Oogaloo. The Oogaloo comes at Conjuration 5, and Conjuration 5 for me is a good, common research target. It's a good early game research target. Why do I like Conjure 5? Conjure 5 gives you, along the way you've picked up all the powers, the Earth Power, Phoenix Power, Earth Power. You get full-sized elementals, and as you can do full-sized elementals a couple of ways. You can do multi-gem casts for air, multi-gem casts for earth, and multi-gem casts for water, all of the above. Underwater, you can do it. You can just do it straight out. You get diversity summons in the form of Nature Water Crosspath Naiads, which gives you N3, Water 3, which is all the water access you could ever want, and nature access, you transform them, you got a mobile chassis. You get Howl, and Howl can win battles if you structure yourself correctly. Howl is a good early game spell and something that your shamans can absolutely cast. And just getting there anyway also gives you these guys, the Oogaloos. Oogaloo are storm flying, sacred, size 3, 30 hit point, like basic thugs, like almost light thuggy sort of chassis, A3 mages, which means they're cloud trappy, and they're big battlefield casters straight out the box. And they cost 24 air gems to summon, which I think is a pretty cheap price to pay for this thing, for this A3 unit. If it gets into melee, it has the anti-demon dagger, magic, anti-demon mace, and a bite attack. 3 weapons. Plus you can give it gear. These are absolutely good casters. They are cloud trapping thugs. They are army support. With the right kit, you can absolutely get use these guys as the center point of an army to, say for example, get Storm Up and get Thunder Strikes or Air Elementals out of your recruitable A2s. They can be kill squads, cloud trapping on an enemy unit, and then a pair of these cloud trapping in, putting Air Elementals into the air will kill a lot of things that might be in your area, so counter thugging. They could be really handy at that sort of thing. There's so many use cases for the Oogaloo, and just having air access, reliable big air access in your nation is a big boost. So for me, having a god who can summon Oogaloo, so a god with at least A3, the Oogaloo can then summon more of themselves because it's only an A3 spell. They can also search for the air gems. They're self-perpetuating in a sense. So this is a reason I would consider a god with A3. Or at least have a plan to get to A3 in your roster. And it's too late to wait for Fairy Kings. I would consider doing it earlier. They're more useful than that. They're more useful than that because I flagged their cloud trapping and their thugging and whatnot. And that's probably a good point to pivot back. Actually, no, before we pivot back into the game, we'll talk heroes. But when we pivot back into the game, we're going to talk about what these guys and your thugging potential as a nation mean in terms of broadening out your combat roster when we talk about real strategy again. Because I talked in general terms earlier for the early game. We're going to talk mid and late game next. But first, let's have a look at heroes. So first of all, here are your non-worthy heroes, and then we'll load the worthy heroes one. The favorite of Enki, his thing is that he is an immortal N3. You control people with immortals, but like, yeah, here's what it is. The enter of the moon is significant because here's your astral 3. Now, with that astral 3 comes a source of astral pearls, and with the S3 plus a booster means astral 5, which means that if you get this hero, so if you don't have misfortune and go long enough, or if you have luck and go a moderate amount, you will have a way to get to your super level 8 summon if you want to. This hero is important because it is a diversity unit. You've got astral access suddenly. And more importantly, you've got crystal access. This is SE. Keep this alive and maybe even consider taking some luck scales in order to get it. Now, what happens when you add worthy heroes? This is what happens when you add worthy heroes. First thing you get is you get a hero that has inbuilt A3. So if you want, if worthy heroes is on and you have luck scales and you want to cheap out, you can rely on Adapa, the 7th Sage, to spawn and create your A3 mages, if you want to. Other than that, she's okay. She's a Holy 3 and she's stealthy. Stealthy Holy 3 is handy. She's got sailing, which can catch people by surprise, I suppose, but you need to put a leadership item on her to make much use out of it. But she can sail Enkidu-sized units. That's handy. But like I said, if you take luck, this is an option to cheap out on your god and avoid having to take A3, but you are relying on her to spawn in order to break you into what might be a significant part of your mid-game play. Bearing in mind, you don't rely on her to get the gems that you're going to need, because at least you'll have lots of A2s out searching before she arrives or your god arrives. Ulan is just, he's handy to have in that he's got some pretty high paths. He's got built-in E3 and built-in water 4. This realistically means water 6. That's all the water you could ever want to summon, cast, or whatever. Water queens, it's all there. Sacred, and it's amphibious unit, so it can go underwater. Sure. This is a nice bonus. It's a Holy 3. It's a good mage. It's solid, but it's not shaping. It's not a diversity. It's not a diversity hero, but it's a nice one to pick up. Anyway, with all that said, let's go back into the game and talk about your plan. So your early game plan, as I said, was pretty simple. It's the struggle bus of troop-led expansion, maybe with your sacreds, depending on what bless you've gone for. And I'm not going to be overly prescriptive there because it's going to come down to your god. And you're basically going to struggle your way out with a little practice. Like I said, like 18-20 province expansion, workable. More with some practice, getting yourself out to turn 12. Turn 12, your dormant comes online. Before that point, you will have site searched a little. You'll have got some air, some earth, and some other mages out, as well as your researchers. You will have been using elders, and if you're using sacreds, galas with your expansion parties. And you will have some forts established. Your dormant will then come out. You will have, by now, probably a little bit of alt, a little bit of const, and a little bit of ench. The reason you're going to do that is so that your god can use its buffs, and so you'll have had time to make some construction 2 armor to equip it. Your god will then do any relevant underwater expansion for you if you've got time. Otherwise, it will defend you from a rush, or it will be around to be a participant in your first war. You need to have picked, before you get to this point, what your strategy is going to be for your first war. If you've got Const 2, then you've got access to the Owl Quill. If you get to Const 4 at some point, you'll be able to make those using hammers. I'd advise waiting until you get to hammers before you do it, but you'll be able to get there. But you need a plan for your early war. Alt 5 is an option. Going Alt 5 gives you access to Wooden Warriors, which will solve part of your protection problems and your troops. The big early game buff. It'll give you Mother Oak, if you're in the game to compete for that, if you happen to be in the game to compete for that. So this is an option. You will have picked up Swarm on the way at level 4, which means all your galas, if you need to, if you're going to fend off a rush, by the time an opponent gets to like your capital or whatever, You'll have a big supply of nature gems, like no doubt. Having 10 or 11 mages that can cast Swarm twice because they're spell singers. Spell singers take half fatigue, so you will get multiple casts out of even these N1 Gala. More if they have a Reinvigoration Bless, which is a decent thing to do with the Earth Paths if you've got them. Can be a really good disincentive. So Alt is a possible path. Conjuration is another. Getting to Conjuration 5 gets you Howl. It gets you all the water elementals. It gets you your air summon. It gets you a whole bunch of stuff. Naiads, Warriors, which you can get to relatively easily. This is all pretty bloody handy sort of stuff. So pick a level 5. It could be Alt. It could be Conj. Those are probably the best two options. Another one, if you've done the relevant build, is an Enchantment Build. I'm not sure I like this one as much, but this is built around saying, hey, I can surprise someone with Foul Vapors because Foul Vapors is an oppressive freaking spell. In order to make this work, what you need is to have poison resistance in your Bless and have enough Sacreds around, plus maybe some summons frontline spells. So you probably want Swarm as well. So that you can go in with a regenerating or poison-resistant army of Sacreds and some Mages, Foul Vapors, and kill the opponent army. So that's how an Ench build works. That's also notable because that's where Cloud Trapeze comes in, and Cloud Trapeze combos with Conjuration for your Air Mages. Const 4 then rounds everything out by giving you access, as I said, to hammers, early boosters, and better Thug Kit. By the point you're doing this, you should have your AE paths available, and you should have Foreign Wrecked, some Death, and your big Shamans, because your Shamans are going to be at the center point of the armies that you point out, coupled with a combination of other mages that you need to do support. I should also make a note here that if you found particularly good independent troops, feel free to recruit them and add them to the Enkidu lineup, because Enkidu aren't particularly great soldiers, and as a result, having independents available is a good news story. Some heavy cavalry, for example, in being recruited from Enkidu cities. So this province here, for example, is right next to my capital. If it wasn't, I'd probably have forted it and be producing cataphracts as far as I could. So your first war is going to be, either defensive or offensively, is going to be a story of can you use your Awakened God, early game buffing and early game Thug Kit, plus one level 5 path, giving you some battlefield-wide spells, whether that is Foul Vapors, Howl and Elementals, or Wooden Warriors, to ward off and win your first battle. Then you need to broaden out, and your question is where you go from there. Getting diversity is a goal for every nation, so this means starting to get your A3 summons out, I would think. Boost your way up Death, and consider bootstrapping a little bit there if you can. Again, depending on what your god options are. And trying to broaden out the base of magic available to you. You will always be held back by the quality of your troops, but the more magic you're able to deploy, the less limited you will be. With A3 and some decent size 3 chassis, you've got the ability to do not great light thugging, but depending on your bless, the potential to definitely do light thugging. So for example, look at the Gudu. Gudu can thug. With the right bless, or even without the right bless, a Gudu can thug. It's just the bless helps. E2 means you can Earth Power, you can Iron Skin, you can do stuff like that. Air can Mist Form, Mirror Image, Personal Flight, Arrow Fend. The A1s are obviously a little more mobile if you boost them. Because, well, you don't have to boost them at level 2, Cloud Trapeze. So you can Cloud Trapeze the A2s, just like you can Cloud Trapeze the A3 Oogalus. And you can augment your troops with some light thugs and raiding. You have the ability to do a little bit of stealthy raiding, and you have the ability to do some light thugging using Gudu, who are relatively cheap for what they are. This leads to the question of, what am I doing with my Bless? And what am I doing with my God, and what am I doing with my scales? And the problem is here is I can't be super prescriptive. I would consider having air on my God so I can guarantee access to the Oogaloo, but you might want to do a luck build and rely on a hero if you're playing worthy heroes. maybe. High death access means that you can turn all your death income into death summons later in the game. Death is a great path to add. You've got options. I wouldn't recommend blood probably, but you could. The question is, how heavy do you go in bless? And do you want a troop bless or a thug bless? I would favor a mage / thug bless over a troop bless. I don't think the Enki's chosen are the sort of sacred who want to carry a major bless. So I would think more like resistances, so that thugs are less vulnerable to automatic issues. Maybe poison resist, so things like I did here where I have a big pool of resistances and poison. This was, I was like joking with, oh, maybe I do want to do a Foul Vapors version, for example. This would make it entirely worthwhile, because you'd have all the mages that were casting, except for the shamans, would be poison resistant, so would the troops. Bang, you're in the money. There's lots of Titan options out there. There's lots of freedom to play around with it. And the good thing is, can obviously use good scales, but you don't need particularly good scales. Gold is going to be the limiter on troop recruitment, not resources or rec points, because you have so many foreign rec troops, and your troops that you do have tend to be more gold intensive than resources or rec points. So sloth and turmoil are on the cards. Turmoil is also not as much of a problem, because you're going to have PD everywhere, because you've got the really cheap guys going out and creating level 19 PD, which means you're going to get the +1 unrest reduction. And if you really want it, once they've leveled you up to level 19, you can spend 20 gold to go to the 2 unrest reduction if you want. That's an option available to you. So I would favor a bless that is more towards diversity summons and thugging and mages than troops, but it's there. Huge range of Titans available to you. You automatically go to Heat 2, your Heat 1 preference, so you pick up 2 scales right there. I think you want to go Magic 3, because you've got a Sacred 7 RP Researcher, so I'd like Magic. So let's say we purchase our growth, most of our growth scales with Heat. We go +1 to get to growth 3. We need to get to +4 to get Magic. Okay, well, we can buy ourselves back to +2 by going Sloth Turmoil. You can even ramp these up further, particularly if you want to up the growth. So Turmoil Luck is a combination some people really like. And if you've gone Magic, Luck Magic has some great events as a combination. Plus, you're going to get access to your heroes, so you might want to go that way. And then it's just setting the right scale for your Titan. I'm going to get out, we're going to have a look at some Titans quickly, but just to show you how broad the selection is. So here are our choices. It's not the largest, but you've got to admit it's still pretty broad. There's a lot of Titans here and a lot of monsters. So discounted ones, just talking discounted ones, include things like the Shedu. This is a monster chassis with Earth Astral. It's relatively cheap. I don't like it. It doesn't have what it needs. It's a trampler, so flying tramplers are cool, but not enough slots for my liking, and also I don't like the pathing. I want air access, but hey, it's there and it's cheap. The Upkalu shouldn't count as a monster. It's Dominion 3, but it's basically a small size, like a size 4 Titan, which makes it hard for it to thug and combat, so I'd probably rule it out. But there's 4 magic paths in there, so lots of choices, and it's Inspiring Researcher 2. Again, cheaper. A couple of these Titans are cheaper, however. The Anunnaki of Love and War, which you saw me use, is an ore chassis with Earth, Air, Nature. So this is where you can get your poison resist, your reinvigoration or your fire and shock resist, and your air access all in one. And she's an ore titan, so she basically gets a free shield of gleaming gold without anything. So slap some armor and iron skin on her, and suddenly she's super high protection. Give her a brand, and she will go to town, or some other tool. So very capable. The Anunnaki of the Underworld is a fear and high-level death access one, if you want to deploy a Titan with those sort of traits early on. Plus she's Pyrrhus resistant, but mostly what you're relying on here is the fear to beat enemy armies, and you're getting big death access later in the game. You're relying on something else for air, but you're going to get yourself Wraith Lords and Liches and all that sort of stuff built on the death income that your death mage is going to produce for you. She doesn't fly though, I don't think. Yeah, I don't think she flies. She still moves very quickly, though. A lot of these ones with their fly with their angel wings, which is kind of handy. All the Anunnaki, couple of them fly. So you've got an A3. If all you care about is air, there you go. Plus, he's got a small area shock lightning attack, which is kind of handy early. Anunnaki is Sweet Waters. Probably pass. Anunnaki of the Moon, I think, is your astral option. Yep. The Anunnaki of Growth and Rebirth is a cool Anunnaki, and you get a 40-point reduction. And Spring Immortality. So this thing comes back, it's immortal, it comes back every spring. It has a free Vine Shield, I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure this thing has a free Vine Shield and summons animals. This immortality isn't worth as much because I'd rather just call the god back. It would be faster than waiting for this immortality. But with a bit of summon chaff and the built-in Vine Shield, this is something that really messed me up as Nazca, actually. This thing almost stopped me rushing a nation as Nazca with a really basic build of this thing in the early game, because it can have a Vine Shield plus a shield which gives it like Ore or an Eye Shield or something like that. Give it a weapon, it's got a little bit of chaff, it can completely regenerate. I think I prefer the Love and War build. You've got a couple of Ilars, they're not discounted. I don't think any of this is discounted. So the ones that are discounted are the Sweet Waters Anunnaki, which I would pass on. Anunnaki of the Sky, which is only air. I think I'd probably pass. Love and War, I like having access to 3 paths for a pretty wide bless that you can afford reasonably. Morning Star isn't discounted, Underworld isn't discounted, but they're all there. Probably wouldn't go Immobile, which I would normally consider for heavy bless, heavy scales, because you're not going to lose the guard, you've got no benefit of calling it back. Probably not the rainbows. Monsters are options as always. Great White Bull is an option, so if you want an Awake Expander and that's all you want it to do, there it is, and you can call it back if needed. Good old Earth Snack if you want to go underwater. One thing I'll say about the snakes as well as all the titans, chest slots means very early underwater access. Otherwise, put a Ring of Water Breathing on a monster and it will go underwater, so all good. Earth's Neck doesn't need anything, but it's so easy to get Water Breathing on a Titan or even on a monster through Rings of Water Breathing that it really doesn't matter. So you can go nuts a little bit. Design your early game pocket super combatant. Pick up a Bless, which will help it a bit to cause shit during your first war to protect you, because people will know you have not great troops and come for you. Get yourself something that'll be a little bit scary early on and help you once you start light thugging and get some mages out. Handy. Decide a plan, go with it. I'm not going to be too prescriptive. And then buy up what you can with your scales. Starting with growth, picking up magic, and then if you can afford some luck, it's there. You don't really need prod. You don't really need order. You don't want to be massing those troops, and you can mass them outside your forts if need be anyway. So, that's my thoughts on EA. Overall, I still probably think this is probably a below average nation. Probably. Shamans are good. Shamans are good. You have light thug access. You're encouraged to take a Titan, a dormant Titan, or a dormant monster, which I think is cool, because more nations should be encouraged to do that, and to recklessly use like a cool early game SC. I like that you're encouraged to do that. The problem is the troop lineup is pretty garbage. A lot of the mages aren't superb. There's no real intimidation factor, which is why we're talking about a rush protection god, which is why we're talking about anemic expansion, which is why we're talking about needing all sorts of buffs to make up for the sin of troops that don't wear hats. The idea of having 16, 18, or even 26 gold troops that can be one-hit headshot by freaking slingstones, and if they get flaming arrows, then there's 2 points of damage, 2 sets of damage in there, and the chance of a kill on a head hit just goes off the freaking charts. Like, yeah, the aversion to hats, the relatively low skills, the gold expensive troops, and the other weakness in the roster mean that despite the fact that there are some serviceable mages and there's a nifty gimmick and trick, I would ultimately give EA probably a below average rating. But I love them anyway. Thanks for sticking with me. I'll be back here relatively soon with M.A. Uruk, which is the commissioned video. We're going to build on what we've talked about with the Enkidu. We're going to examine what changes in the Middle Age and why I think the Enkidu go from being a bit of a punching bag nation in the early age to being a much more, I would consider, a more serious contender in the Middle Age. Thanks for joining me. See you soon.